Leading off our discussion tonight, our NBC News correspondent Heidi Przybyla. Heidi broke the report about Democrats focusing on the abuse of power in their articles of impeachment. Mieke Eoyang is with us, former member of the House, staff member of the House Intelligence Committee. She's the vice president of National Security Program at the Third Way. And Jonathan Alter, columnist for Daily Beast and an MSNBC political analyst, is with us. Heidi, let me start with you and your breaking news reporting about what the Democrats are considering. Do we know now whether Nancy Pelosi whether Nancy Pelosi wants, let's start with Nancy Pelosi, a single article of impeachment that is simply about the phone call with the president of Ukraine, or the possibility of including, say, elements of the Mueller report, obstruction of justice, in separate articles of impeachment?
We do know, Lawrence, that right now she wants a simple article with the umbrella being abuse of power, and underneath that, everything that happened with regards to Ukraine, which includes that phone call. It includes the reports of a quid pro quo about the military aid. It includes pushing aside the former ambassador to Ukraine in order to install the president's hand-picked confidants, who referred to themselves as the Three Amigos, who then helped push the Ukrainians to try and cook up charges against the Bidens. It includes all of those things, but it is narrowly focused in the sense that it does just focus on Ukraine, Lawrence. Still under debate is the second wave of charges, which would be related to obstruction of justice, contempt of Congress. Believe it or not, that's actually a much more difficult and contentious one to decide on, whether that is going to be just Ukraine, where they think they have a really strong case, given the October 8th White House letter from Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, basically telling Congress to go you know where, and that they're just not going to comply with anything. And whether they're going to include anything on Mueller and obstruction, Lawrence, I'm told it's a little more difficult because Congress never did get the chief witness in the obstruction charges, Don McGahn, to testify before Congress, and they don't want to give any excuses for anybody to not support what they believe is a clear-cut case of an impeachable offense when it comes as well to obstruction.
Heidi, is there any indication in your reporting of what the process will be? How will the Democrats arrive at a consensus of what the shape of the articles should be?
That's still really early, Lawrence, and I must stress that in my reporting that while there is this big umbrella focus on the narrative of abuse of power, the Speaker's office did caution me that the actual legal drafting of articles has not begun because they haven't collected all of the evidence yet and all of the information. But historically, what would happen is that all of the committees would send in their best information. Jerry Nadler, the Judiciary Committee chairman, has already called on all committees to send their best information to Judiciary, which would then be tasked with drawing up specific articles. But make no mistake, the Speaker is going to be the one who drives this all and who makes all of these decisions as to specifically how many articles there are going to be. And right now, again, we're a snapshot in time, but according to my reporting, the thing that has been decided is the abuse of power narrative, that they will hammer out something on obstruction/contempt of Congress, but that additional articles at this time are unlikely. Now, that could change with pushback from various stakeholders and committee chair people who've been doing months of investigative work on issues like emoluments, who believe that the president is clearly violating the Constitution by continuing to, own his companies and benefit from the presidency with the Trump Hotel in Washington and foreign governments there taking up in order to curry favor with him. But right now, we're just looking at abuse of power in Ukraine and then something separate on obstruction in Ukraine and maybe something from the Mueller report.
Mieke, with your experience working in the House on the Democratic staff side, how does that sound to you? And do you think that the Democrats in the House would agree to that approach?
Look, I think it's always a challenge to manage a caucus as diverse as one that's in the majority. And you've got people with a lot of different competing political interests here and a lot of different kinds of concerns. But one thing that we've learned is that Nancy Pelosi is a master politician, and her ability to understand exactly where the caucus is and what they can support and what the political implications are of that is unmatched. And then she's going to be able to marry that with what is the legal case for impeachment of this president. I think that her instinct to make it as simple as possible to understand with his umbrella of abuse of power is really helpful. All too often, Democrats can really get bogged down in process arguments, and making it a very simple, clear, this is about how Trump has abused his office and used his power for his own personal benefit, that can help cut through all the legalese.
Jonathan, there's a risk to history in a very narrow drafting of articles, and that is, does it leave the implication, if you leave out the emoluments violations, that that's okay? Does it somehow certify what Donald Trump has done running a hotel business in Washington, for example, taking income from foreign governments that way? Does it certify his refusal to obey the law and hand over a very clear law that says the Treasury Department must hand over any tax return that the House Ways and Means Committee demands? They're violating that law, and a string of other things. And is it a concern that to leave out this long string of things might leave them as certified, acceptable action for the future president?
I guess it is a concern, but it's a balancing test because you want to be politically disciplined. Mm-hmm. And Nancy Pelosi's a boss. You know, remember what Will Rogers said about the Democrats? You know, I'm a member of no organized political party. I'm a Democrat. Mm-hmm. Nancy Pelosi's disproving this. She's running a really disciplined effort. So today she released a fact sheet, which I would urge everybody to review. It's just 4 pages. First page is on the shakedown, it's called. Second page is on the pressure campaign. Third page is on the cover-up. So it lays out in very bold colors exactly what the impeachable offense was. Now, given what Mick Mulvaney did this week, the argument that there was no quid pro quo isn't, I know you don't like that expression, right, but it's now in tatters. Right. So when we get into the trial, and there's going to be a trial, that's now clear, Chief Justice Roberts presiding, we may not even be arguing about whether there was abuse of power. The Republicans are now on the way to admitting that there was abuse of power. Then the only argument will be, does it rise to the level of impeachment? That is a very, very bad state of affairs for Donald Trump, where all you're arguing about is not whether he did something really wrong, but just whether it rises to the level of impeachment. And that's a case that Democrats can make in front of the whole country in that trial.
Heidi, in your reporting, are you finding any kind of lines of defense forming for the president in the House of Representatives?
Not really. I've been speaking with some Republicans who the Democrats would be targeting in order to get votes from some Republicans, and they've said that they really just want proof positive that this is a quid pro quo. Well, those meetings were prior to Mick Mulvaney's confession, essentially, that it was a quid pro quo. And so I think they're just kind of laying low for right now. There's definitely the majority of Republicans who will never vote for this, but they don't need the majority. They just need some Republicans to vote for it. And in my discussions with Democrats, you know, there's a specific framing of this. It's not just abuse of power because he was withholding a White House meeting. It's abuse of power because reportedly, and if the facts bear out, he was withholding federally appropriated tax dollars, endangering our national security, because just to remind people, this military aid was to be used by Ukraine, which is a buffer country against Russian aggression and Russian expansion. And therefore, it becomes a danger and a risk to our national security. And that is the framing that Democrats are going to use with the public and with these Republicans that they're hoping to bring over.
Mieke, I want to check with you on Rachel's reporting at the top of the hour that they're now going to be scheduling some depositions on weekends going forward. Does that sound to you like they are trying to make some kind of at least penciled in deadline at this point?
Yeah, I think they are. And what typically happens is when you have something that's of an urgent national concern, the schedule goes out the window. You wind up working around the clock. You work weekends. As you pointed out, it's usually the staff who does that. The members will pop in, but you will press really hard towards a deadline. So the staff and the members who are working on these issues have a lot of sleepless nights ahead of them, because it's not just the depositions themselves. It's going through them. It's fact checking. It's pulling in all the documents that they've asked for. There's a lot to go through here. But what they are doing with all that information is filling in the details. We know the basic outlines of this. We know that the president was using his office to put pressure on the Ukrainians for his own personal benefit. It's just the question of how. And then the real issue will be, once we have all that evidence and they lay that all out there before the American people, does that convince some of the Republicans and some of these people who are on the fence that this was, in fact, the quid pro quo, the kind of real abuse of power that a lot of people think that it was?
Mieke Eoyang, thank you for joining us to start the discussion tonight. And Heidi, thank you for joining us with your breaking news reporting. Really important for getting us started tonight. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.